Great. Well, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us today on this launch event of our new report looking at regional growth strategies and frameworks across two case studies, one in Osaka, Japan, and the other Birmingham and the West Midlands. And we thought this was a really good opportunity to showcase how growth strategies integrate with what's happening at different spatial scales, particularly as they pivot around second cities. And we thought, well, why not shine the light on a region of the world where we don't have many stories to tell and share? And so that was sort of the motivation behind picking Japan. It's been a wonderful experience working with our partners at City Reti here at the University of Birmingham, who we've collaborated with for a number of years. So I'd like to thank both Abby, Gail Taylor, and Anne Green for their support over the past few years in different types of research, but mainly focused so far around regional inequalities, how different places are working together to improve outcomes, both socially and economically. And thank you all for coming. We just had a nice 2-day annual conference for SIPFA just across the road at the convention center. And it's nice to be able to visit cities such as Birmingham that have done a rather fantastic job of regeneration and integration, both locally within the neighborhoods, but also with the constituent local authorities, and really leading the way. I mean, I know they're a trailblazer, but I mean, it really is refreshing to see that despite political strikes within the composition of these regional groups, we can still have amazing success stories like we see here in the city today. So, oh yeah, and I also want to thank our co-author on this report, Naoki Fujiwara, who is a professor at Otemon Gakuin University in Osaka. He is one of the partners of this work, and the collaboration on that front was quite unique for me, and maybe also for University of Birmingham, to be able to do a piece of work with another university in a different country. And personally, I thought it was an amazing opportunity to do this kind of work despite the distance. And thanks in large part to some funding that we received through 3 foundations based in Japan who have supported this research, we were able to, Abby and myself, go to Osaka. And along with Naoki, we were able to have meetings with a rather diverse range of stakeholders across government at different spatial scales, with academics, with practitioners, and that really enriches the type of research we're able to do. And we're able to have Naoki and some of his colleagues come over to the UK, the West Midlands, and we were able to reciprocate. And I think that point, while it often gets pushed to the sideline because it's sort of knowledge exchange and sort of cultural exchange, it's really, really important because whilst you can kind of sift through the numbers, do a lot of desk research and interviews, being able to see local places as they develop and thrive, and also to see some of the challenges in person, I think really enriched not just the conversations, but also the relationships that connect this type of research with a future pathway for future collaboration. So I would like to thank all of our partners and the funders who make this type of work possible, and that encourage us to sort of carry on this type of work, which otherwise might not see the light in a way that we think should be elevated in the national discussion. So the research is primarily focused around institutional frameworks, looking at governance structures and fiscal mechanisms that enable growth across local, regional, and national, what are some good practices and where can we learn to improve outcomes in both types of jurisdictions. And both Japan and the UK are very different, as we'll see in the presentation and discussion today. The UK is very centralized. A lot of the funding streams, therefore, reflect that degree of centralization. Versus in Japan, the devolution journey is far more advanced. Chronologically, they're a couple decades ahead of us in that journey. They're far less centralized in terms of how their fiscal mechanisms fund growth in different places. They're much more responsive in making sure that they update not just formula, but also the frameworks in which funds are distributed across local places and regions. And that came through quite clearly in our discussions with our Japanese colleagues. And as a result of those mechanisms being more timely and equitable, there was less of a sense of, or there's more confidence and a perception of fairness across different jurisdictions within the country, that they weren't getting shortchanged and that they were happy with redistribution, even if the redistribution of resource meant that there was less for them. And that, I think, is a really critical takeaway for the UK, which sort of has been structured in a way where if I have less, then that's not a good thing. In Japan, the sense we got was it's okay because it is a fair system, and the formula and structures are inclusive in their development, and as a result, it leads to an ethos of sharing, if that makes sense. That will come through in the presentations. So the four research themes that we focused on were, one, the institutional conditions for growth outside of capital city regions, as I said. Particularly, this is an acute problem in Japan where the population is shrinking. So there are a lot of towns and villages where they still require infrastructure that can be quite costly. But there isn't necessarily a population to support it. So on a per capita basis, you might, well, I actually asked them, well, it seems a bit of a waste of money, but you get the point I'm saying, is this really, if you did a cost benefit ratio, this wouldn't seem to pass, so why are you doing it? And the point is, well, because there are people here, there are communities here, and these types of things are important to us nationally. And so as a result, it doesn't matter what the cost benefit analysis says, we need to support local communities and growth. And this is particularly true in communities like Fukushima, which pretty much got destroyed after the tsunami and incident that they had at the nuclear sites. They are redeveloping and regenerating places like that. Obviously, that's outside of the Osaka area, but I just highlight that as an example. The second theme is around determining regional groups. How do you include or exclude local places in broader regional authorities? And what factors are most important in producing successful groupings? This, of course, is a key part of the narrative that we are in today here in the UK, as the devolution white paper was published earlier in the spring, outlining a roadmap. It's still not quite clear. I think we're learning as to how to create these groups, and we're going to have a discussion around that. Anthony will be talking about how we can go about better devising strategies that make sense. The third point is around funding mechanisms for partnership engagement. I touched on that already, and we will have President of Japan sharing his perspectives on how it works in Osaka, and again, connecting that with central and local and prefectorial. And the final fourth point, the fourth theme that we cover in the report is around monitoring and evaluation. This is an area, it's a bit weird for me to say this, but this is where I think the UK does well, I think internationally. We don't actually do the monitoring and evaluation well, but we have the monitoring and evaluation frameworks that are quite the envy of other countries. So, but that's something to be proud of. So, like we have the green book, the book, all these colored books, it's the entire rainbow. If we could just do a little bit better of the implementation, which is stymied by the way that we allocate funding from things like the spending review we had a couple of weeks ago. So that point will be touched on by the panel as well. So those are the themes. We have some methods on the screen of, it wasn't just desk research and looking at data sets. We also had a rich conversation with different stakeholders across the piece in both countries at different spatial scales. So that was really important in informing our interpretation of what we were sifting through at our desks. And, that's how you do research, right? You kind of sift through this mountain of information. So now we have the deliverables, which we're quite pleased to say that we were able to translate the report into Japanese, thanks to our colleagues at SIPFA Japan. Professor Ishihara and his team helped us translate. And this is really important. Sometimes it's overlooked, but if people in our partner groups can't effectively engage with the research because they can't read it, then it limits greatly the impact the research has. So we are very grateful that they gave us their time and expertise in translating this fairly chunky piece of work that had a lot of technical information so that our colleagues in Japan can actually appreciate and learn from it as well. So at this point, we have some short video that will just basically summarize a lot of the key points that the panel will cover. Then we will transition over to the panel itself for some reflections. Each speaker will be speaking for about 7 to 8 minutes on one of the 4 themes. We'll then open it up Abby will then sort of bring it all together, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A. So that's the format. Here is the video. Please, we do have a number of people from Japan joining us via webinar. This event was only an in-person event for people in this country, but for our Japanese guests, we opened it up as a webinar. So after the English version, we'll show a Japanese version so that they can see. It's just a 2-minute video, but the technology isn't quite there yet where we could kind of do it at the same time, if you see what I mean. So please bear with us. It'll be 2 minutes plus another 2 minutes.
Around the world, governments are challenged to address regional inequalities. Work from SIPFA and City Ready at the University of Birmingham shows that learning from successful strategies can make a real difference when developing policies. Building on previous research, our new report looks at 2 second cities, Birmingham in the West Midlands region of the UK and Osaka in Japan, to see what they can learn from each other. These urban areas and their wider regions share some similarities as former industrial areas that have experienced recent regeneration. By speaking to practitioners and policymakers in each area, we have gathered expert insights on how devolution and funding frameworks can be used to drive initiatives for sustainable growth and a revival in productivity. Working alongside partner organisations, local and regional government leadership can foster the shared vision and long-term thinking required to effect change. Where ideas are being put into practice, embedded monitoring and evaluation are key. It is vital to capture what works so that strategies can be adapted and any successes can be shared. Our research aims to give practical guidance on how these measures can be implemented. The UK and Japan are 2 countries dealing with demographic and economic pressures. Reducing regional disparities and making the most of devolution can contribute to national growth and benefits for all residents.
の政府の多くは地域間格差という課題に直面しています。シッファとバーミンガム大学シティレディの共同研究では、成功事例の分析が政策立案に具体的な効果をもたらすことを明らかにしています。これまでの研究に基づき、今回の新たな報告書では、英国ウェストミッドランズのバーミンガムと日本の大阪というその国における第二の都市同士が互いに何を学び合えるかを検討しています。これらの都市とその周辺地域はかつての工業地帯であり、近年再生に取り組んでいるという共通点があります。各地域の実務者や政策立案者から実情を伺うことで、地方分権やさまざまな財源を活用して持続可能な成長と生産性の回復を目指す取り組みについて専門的な知見を集めました。地域や地方自治体がその指導的役割を発揮し、行政のパートナーとなる組織と連携することで、変革に向けた共通のビジョンと長期的な視野が育まれていきます。構想を実現していく段階では、モニタリングと評価をシステムに組み込むことが鍵となります。成功事例を把握することで戦略を柔軟に調整し、成功体験を共有することが肝要です。この研究では、こうした手法をどのように実行に移せるかについて、実践的な指針を提供することを目的としています。英国と日本は人口構造や経済の面で共通の課題を抱えています。地方分権を最大限に活用し、地域格差を是正することは、国家の成長と住民すべてにとっての利益につながります。
Great. So hopefully that gave the essence of what we will be presenting today. Putting together short videos does take a lot of effort, doesn't it? When you see it on the screen, you're like, oh, that was nice. But there's so much, gosh, there's so much. Yes, many late nights trying to discuss how we were going to put it all together. But anyway, we have the pleasure of having a distinguished panel of experts discussing each of the four themes today. We'll start off with Professor Ishihara, who is the president of SIPA Japan. He will be discussing funding mechanisms, including local revenue capacities, financial resilience, and the evolving role of innovation in public financial management across Japan. Then Katie Trout from the West Midlands Growth Company will share insights on the institutional conditions needed to foster growth outside capital cities, reflecting on recent developments in UK policy and international lessons. Anthony Breach from the Center for Cities will then delve into the factors behind determining regional groupings, comparing international experiences and shedding light on the opportunities and challenges of the UK's devolution journey. And then we will have Yoshihisa Inada from the Asia Pacific Institute of Research, who will examine how effective monitoring and evaluation frameworks contribute to successful governance, particularly through the example of the current Osaka 2025 Expo that's taking place in Japan and will continue for a few more months there. And last but not least, we'll have Abigail Taylor from the University of Birmingham City Regional Economic Development Institute, who, as I said previously, will kind of try to synthesize the richness of the four themes. We'll open it up to conversation after that. So at this point, I will hand it over to Professor Ishihara, who is joining us via video link. Hello, Professor Ishihara. Can you hear us?
Hi, Jeff, thank you very much for introducing me. And hello, my colleagues in Birmingham of SIPA. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And so I wanted to join the SIPA annual conference and would like to join the president dinner and the beer party. But this year, I couldn't. So, but I'm very happy to be here with my colleagues in Birmingham this time. And thank you very much for the short movie in Japanese version. you may not be able to understand at all. But this is, I think it's a very important opportunity for us all. So I would like to make my presentation within 5 minutes. So this is my title, and I'm belonging to the SIPA Japan. And we are very happy to interpret or translate the original version of this SIPA report into Japanese. And maybe next month, SIPA Japan will issue the SIPA Japan journal. In that, we would like to introduce the contents of this original version, enabling regional growth to the Japanese member. We have about 350 Japanese members. And I would like to start my slide. So please, next slide. Yes. So thank you very much. So we are referring to Osaka, but in Osaka, we have several areas. And please show me the next slide, photo. Next slide. No. Yes, this one. So there is many Osakas. So in English version, Osaka City, Osaka County, and Osaka area. For researching this kinds of research, I recommend to use the Osaka area because the Osaka City with population is about 2.5 or 6 million. Osaka County with 7 million, but Osaka area more larger. And when we think about Osaka and Osaka area, what is most important is to concentrate on the existence of, please check the photo, Economic Strategy Bureau, City of Osaka. This means Osaka City's government's office, but it has a huge link with Osaka County and the Osaka areas, many cities and villages and towns. Next slide, please. And Osaka is very famous for the commercial area. Tokyo and maybe Kyoto is and was the capital of our country, Japan. And Osaka isn't, but Osaka is, we think that Osaka is a center of the commerce and industrial area. This is similar with the case of the Birmingham. And please, next slide. Yes, as I have already explained, in Osaka area, there are many cities, many towns, and the total population is not so small. The Japanese population is about 125 millions. And in Osaka area, in my understanding, more than 20 million people are now living. Next slide, please. And from here, a little bit academic one. So about the local government independent revenue. So this means how the local government in Japan could get revenue. Different from the UK, we have a special local government tax system, which is local income tax. Maybe in the UK, you have only the property tax systems only, but in our country, Japan, the local government will be able to get much money from as income tax. This is similar. National income tax and local income tax we have, which means for us, it is not happy because we need to pay much money to the government, but the local government, Japanese government could get the local income tax. But if we look at the rural area, the very small number of people live and lives. So the Japanese government, especially the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the Communication, compensate the lack of the financial resources for such a small population, local authorities. This is a very, very difficult system. Though I am academia, but it's so difficult to understand this system fully. But if I think very, very simply, if the Japanese local government could not get much money from the people. So the central government will compensate it. Next slide, please. Yes. Please, one slide back, please. Yes, this is a symbol mark of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Yes, very huge ministry, and the more than 99% of people should look at our the many papers from this ministry. We call that them as a 総務省. This is very, very important ministry. Next slide, please. Please. No, maybe one slide. Yes. And so financial soundness, how should we check? We have Act, so Local Finance Soundness Act. In this act, there are 5 financial indicators, and the Japanese government, Ministry of Internal Affairs, set some boundary. If the local government exceeds that, they will have a penalty from the central government. Next slide, please. So, for example, the rural area. Next slide. Yes. No. Photo, please. Yes. Yeah. So yesterday I tried to find this kind of photo for about 1 hour, and I found this one. So the UK, our friends in the UK, please remember the name of Yubari. This city is a very, very famous in this country because we have about 1,800 local authorities, local governments, and just very small number of local governments bankrupted. The Yubari is most famous. This city, Yubari, was very famous for producing a coal, a black diamond. But now we are using another type of energy other than oil, and we are using natural powers. So the Yubari city, the population decreased rapidly and bankrupted. So this city exceeds very, very risky boundary line. So the Japanese government is now checking this city's activities and giving much advices. So like this, based on the act, based on the act, and if some local authorities couldn't get the target, like Yubari City, the Japanese central government would like to give good advice and hope this kind of city to be improved. Next slide, please. And from here, it is very important because the report of this time from SIPA is concentrating on the economical growth. But we are accountants, public finance accountants, and our mission and our capability may have some link with such kind of economical growth, but it is very difficult to explain. So, for example, consistency between the public finance management and related sciences. This is very, very difficult. But so the UK, our colleagues may be able to understand the existence, for example, the PPP contract. There are many types, DBBOT, concession, etc. And we may be able to check the transparency of financial information can be analyzed from the perspective of IPSAS, or differences in contracts type may result in variations in aspects such as risk disclosure, asset recognition, and the fulfillment of accountability obligations or missions, enabling the identification of potential impacts on accounting practices and institutional operations in public services. But this is very, very academia. So please check next slide, please. So we will be, next slide, please. So no, one slide back, please. Yes, we will be able to check this. But however, this kind of further details are yet to be determined. And my PhD students in Ishihara Laboratory are currently working on this issue. So this is our problem, to link public finance management with many economical problems. So as an audience here, we have 6 or 7 Japanese colleagues here. And from Japanese side, we would like to try to make clear this kind of disciplines methodology. So next slide, please. So finally, the audit and inspection in Japanese local governments. We have audit committee system, a little bit different from the UK. So usually the member of audit committees are not councillors, but some councillors, less than 50%, are belonging to the audit committees. Mainly, Japanese local governments audit committees are composed of officers, and especially outside people living in this area. So please check next photo. Next photo, please. Yes, this photo. Yes, so the people in the center with white shirts is the former governor of Osaka County Council, Mr. Matsui. And other people are member of audit and inspection commissioners, and they are explaining the result of audit and preparing, submitting the audit report to the governor. But you may be very easily understand this situation is very formal, very formal. If I say exactly, this isn't a substantial one. So like this, a ceremony is very important in our country, but the substance of the audit report, I think, in my understanding, is not beyond our expectation. This is very important issue. Next slide, please. And finally, about the professional qualification of public finance management in Japan. We do not have any professional qualification like SIPA, CPFA. In the UK, you have a 6 organization for accounting qualification, but in our country, 1 or 2. The most famous one is Certified Public Accountants. This is the system derived from the US one. And the Japanese CPA's organization is JICPA. And the JICPA has a strong link with ICAEW. So now you may have already understood SIPA has a strong link with ICAEW. So from our for the SIPA strategy through the ICAEW, we are very happy if SIPA try to get a new link with JICPA through the activities of ICAEW. This may help the performance of public finance management in Japan. This is my understanding. Thank you very much. That's all my presentation. Thank you very much. Jeff, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, we will pivot to Katie Trout, who's the Deputy Chief Executive at the West Midlands Growth Company. And she will be reflecting on institutional conditions for growth outside of capital regions.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey, and good morning, everybody, and a special hello to all colleagues in Japan joining us today. It's great that you can be with us. So my name is Katie Trout, and I'm the Deputy Chief Executive at the West Midlands Growth Company. For those of you who aren't aware of what the Growth Company is, we are the investment promotion agency and the destination management organisation of West Midlands Combined Authority, which is a huge amount of words, isn't it? But what it really means is that we are commissioned by the Combined Authority and the 7 local authorities that make up that Combined Authority, so Birmingham, Coventry, Wolverhampton, Solihull, Sandwell, Dudley and Walsall, to try to attract investment into the region, to attract new businesses to come and locate here, to bring in more tourists, both from a business and a leisure perspective, and also to try and attract events as well. So those can be business conference events or major sporting events too. We are very much a partnership of the public, private and academic sectors, and we get the majority of our funding through the Combined Authority and the public sector, but also some from universities and businesses as well. So I wanted to just give a few reflections from the West Midlands perspective on the part of the report that reflects on institutional conditions for growth outside of capital city regions. And I wanted to focus particularly on the devolution journey of the West Midlands, the work that we've been doing to develop an international strategy, and some of the opportunities and challenges in how we come across on the global stage. So just want to start it with our devolution journey. So it began back in 2015 when the 7 local authority leaders agreed to sign a devolution deal with government, which led to the creation of the Combined Authority, the advent of our first mayor, and a series of powers and funding to be devolved to the West Midlands. You can tell how long ago that was by the fresh-faced look of the Chancellor, George Osborne, as he was then, and things may have moved on a little bit since then. And I feel like I should give a special shout out to Tony in the front row here, who was one of my fellow negotiators of that deal. So as I said, that was the first stage of the journey for the region. We then went on to have the Combined Authority established back in 2016. The first mayor was elected in 2017, and we got our second devolution deal focused on growth a little bit later on in that year. There was then a bit of a devolution desert for the region, where we thought after the first two deals, that the floodgates would open and more powers and funding would flow through from us, but there was very much a hiatus. Looking back, I can see why the country went through something called Brexit. There also happened to be a global pandemic and various changes at government level. So you can see why perhaps Whitehall wasn't really focused on devolving more down to the regions. But it did mean that it was a sort of challenging start for us. It was then in 2023, then ourselves as the West Midlands, but also Greater Manchester, were given Trailblazer devolution deals, which really started to kickstart the process again for us. And that led to the first integrated settlement, which the region has this year. So this means for the first time, the region gets a pot of funding from Whitehall, split into 5 different thematics. This is a huge step change from where we have been, and it means that we don't now need to keep going to government to bid for new pots of funding. It will get even better from next year when we get a multi-year integrated settlement as well. So we will have a budget, the Combined Authority will, for a 3-year basis. We'll have to see what the size of that budget is. That is still to be determined, but the principle of it is a very positive. But we really want to see this as just being the start of even more devolution. I was particularly struck by one of the quotes in the report, which was an interview that you did with someone in Japan, where they said they actually don't have any more powers to ask the Japanese government for. We are a long way from that, I think it's fair to say. With the Labour government, when they came to power, we had, I suppose, a kind of a view that the devolution discussion would be kind of kick-started again. And that certainly their priorities became clearer when we got the devolution white paper published. And I just wanted to pull out a few reflections from that. So firstly, it was great to see the status of the combined authorities reinforced in that paper, and actually the change of the name to strategic authority I think is really important, because it does signify the role that those authorities need to play going forward, and the fact that they also must add value to what can already happen through local authorities at a local level. There was also very much a move to devolution by default. devolution by default as well. So I think this is starting to move us much more to the Japanese model of doing things, where in Japan there's much more of an organised process for devolution to come down to regional areas. There are also national special strategic zones where regions are able to ask for powers, try them out, and then they get rolled out across the country. So there is certainly a benefit of this process because it means that we don't have to each area go to government and put our case together for a power. There's much more of an assumption it will get rolled out to you. However, it might mean that combined authorities like ourselves in the West Midlands that have enjoyed more of a privileged status, perhaps it's more of a competition with newer combined authorities coming through. There's also now more funding certainty, thanks to the white paper, and I've mentioned the integrated settlements, which are positive, but we still don't have full fiscal devolution. We were asking for that back in 2015, weren't we, Tony, and didn't get very far, and things haven't really moved on much since then. So we still, as regions, don't have all the powers and levers that we would like to be able to raise finance. So again, very different from the Japanese model. The white paper also gave more detailed and specific powers to mayors for planning. This includes developing spatial development strategies. I personally think this is a really important step because actually if you've got your economic strategy, to have planning alongside it is critical. However, I'm not naive to think that this won't be without political challenges to enable that to happen. But the final point, if we're actually going to get the opportunities from this white paper, we've got to get departments to all really buy into devolution. I think it's fair to say that some have been very much on the positive devolution journey since the start, and others have been much more reticent. And government really needs to work with those departments to get them to see the value of devolving powers and funding to regions. One of the departments that has historically not been so much part of the devolution discussion is the Department for Business and Trade. But we're really pleased through the Trailblazer deal that we were able to get elements of inward investment and trade into that discussion. And one of the key parts of that was agreement by government that we would co-develop an international strategy for the West Midlands. We've been doing this developing this over a period of time, working really closely with the Department for Business and Trade, Visit Britain and Visit England, but also regional partners, both public sector, businesses and universities in the academic sector as well. It's been very much a collaborative process to look at what are our priorities going forward, and thereby how do we align our collective resource to make those happen. And that's, if we get it right, is going to be a huge step forward to actually get government funds linked to what we want to be delivered within the region. And we're now looking to take that forward through the West Midlands Growth Plan, which will be published later on in July. A key part of that will be the creation of a Global West Midlands Partnership. So this is again about bringing all those players together to look at what we need to do internationally, to agree the key markets that we need to be able to work on, to be able to respond to geopolitical changes, and by goodness, there's an awful lot of those, isn't there? But also really see how we're going to achieve those priorities. Again, this is really the idea is to bind government into what we want to be doing regionally. So it's not rocket science, but again, it will be a huge improvement from where we have been. So finally then, just to touch on some reflections on West Midlands on the global stage. So first of all, we are a really internationally significant economy. So our economy is the same size as some small Eastern European countries. We've got a large, diverse and young population, and it's growing significantly as well. We've got fantastic connectivity too, which is only going to improve through the advent of high speed too. We've got a brilliant talent pool as well, 210,000 students across our 9 world-class universities. We've got phenomenal quality of life here as well, and also over 100 R&D assets. This is all helping us to become things like the fastest tech sector in the country, and the number of startups that we've got, etc. So all of this makes a really compelling proposition for us to put out to businesses that are looking to locate into the UK. And the recent EY stats on foreign direct investments have shown that we are still the best performing regional location in England alongside the Northwest, and also in the top 15 of regions across Europe as well for FDI. It's not always easy though. We have historically had big challenges in terms of the visibility of the region, not just compared with London, but also compared with our northern neighbours, Manchester. So less people know about us and our offer here. We've also had to struggle with perceptions as well. So again, like Osaka, we've got the industrial heritage, and a lot of people don't appreciate how much the Birmingham and the wider region has moved on since then. However, recent perception surveys have shown that we are making improvements on that. So from 2021 to 24, we've seen a percentage increase from 41% to 53% of intermediaries. So those are the people who work with businesses, event buyers, etc. internationally, now understand much more about the region, have much greater perceptions. The positive sentiment of those who know about the West Midlands is also increasing, as well as the number of intermediaries who are considering recommending the region to clients. The numbers are slightly lower on the last two there in terms of tourists. So we've still got more to do in terms of increasing positive sentiment amongst them and people actively considering coming here to the city and wider region. But we are making progress. However, there's only so much that we can do. We've also got the global climate in which we're working in that we need to navigate as well. And there is a huge amount of uncertainty out there. So conflict, tariffs, inflation, to name but a few things that we are competing against, which also makes that investment piece challenging. So FDI fell by 8% in 2024 globally. Whilst Europe remains the largest recipient of FDI, the gap is closing significantly. So we are 11% down in Western Europe last year compared with the average for the last 3 years. And you can see it's the opposite direction if you look at Asia Pacific, up 30%, and the Middle East up 71%. And you can also see that UK FDI has also fallen over that time period. So we're now at the lowest level in a decade. So whilst we can be doing an awful lot as a region to promote ourselves, get our narrative right, try to dispel some of those myths, we're fighting for a smaller share of the pie as well. So for me, this kind of brings it back to the fact that we really need that clear strategy about what we're looking to do. We absolutely need those strong partnerships to deliver it across the public, private and academic sectors, but we also need those tools and levers to be able to get to the greatest impact as well. And actually that makes us very, very similar to Osaka too. We may have many different factors about ourselves, but we all share that piece as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. Next, we'll pivot towards a different topic around how the regional groupings, how should they be determined? And we have, for reflections on that theme, Anthony Breach, who's the Associate Director at the Center for Cities. Anthony.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Jeff, for a great introduction. Great. So my name is Anthony Breach. I'm Associate Director at Center for Cities. I'm the lead on devolution and local finance, as well as housing and planning. I'd just like to say, first of all, thanks everyone for coming, and particularly colleagues from Japan who are in the room, but also those who are online. And I'd like to say as well, it was a great paper. I thought it was a really valuable contribution to such a deep dive into Osaka and Birmingham. I've done work before on comparing cities internationally in their economies. It is very difficult and very challenging. So I can appreciate it as a valuable piece of work that adds a lot to the debate. I'm going to talk today about putting kind of the local finance situation in particular in context between the UK and Japan, and how that should help us determine our thinking on regional groupings and how we should think about devolution going forward. So for those who don't know us at Centre for Cities, we are a think tank based in London. We look at regional economies up and down the country, particularly urban economies. And the reason we do that is because the underperformance of city economies matters to the national economy. So this is a chart. Not yet. I'm going to flip back through these.
It's a little temperamental.
You have to play the hokey pokey with the presentation, aren't I? So this is a chart looking at productivity on our vertical axis and population size on the horizontal axis. And this is all of the cities in the G7 that are bigger than Nottingham. And you can see British cities there in purple. And you can see that while London is pretty close to the international trend line for the G7, the other big cities in the UK are all far below trend. In fact, of the 20 cities in the bottom, 112 large cities in the G7, 7 of those are British. And you can see that, so there's a massive problem here with how our big cities outside London underperform. The underperformance of them accounts for about 50% of our productivity gap with France and with Germany. And so improving their performance improves the performance of the UK as well. You can also see some Japanese cities on this chart. So you can see Tokyo and Osaka. They're in the bottom right corner as large cities, as large urban areas that don't perform as well as they might expect compared to international comparisons. What this seems to be is that Japan's overall productivity is low. So while the Japanese national economy might have some issues, there's not a specifically urban element to Japan's economic underperformance. Great. So I just to sort of set out a quick summary of our view on issues with local finance in the UK. As Jeff mentioned at the start, we have a very centralised local funding system, and we think this is at sort of the core of a lot of our problems that we see in local government across the country. It cares so much about equalisation, it actually makes the country unequal. It's too reliant on property taxes. We don't have the same income taxes that Professor Ishihara mentioned, and our tax base is fragmented across local economies. That's combined with problems on the spending side, looking at statutory duties. And we think the core part of that solution is then devolution has to come with fiscal devolution to be a success. So I won't spend too long on the spending side. I think a lot of the British audience in the room will be very familiar with this. But obviously, local government finance in the present day is in a pretty dire state. We've had very large cuts to grant since 2010. The amount of resource available has shrank. The amount of need that has grown, particularly in statutory services such as adult social care, children's social care, special educational needs, and homelessness has exploded. And crucially, the amount of revenue that places are able to raise has not increased to be able to fill that gap. So the result is that unprotected services, non-statutory services, have been cut to the bone, as this chart from our report from just before COVID shows on the slide above. Let's focus on the revenue side. I think in the revenue side, I think this thing where you see some of the biggest differences in between Japan and the UK. So again, looking at the G7, this is a chart showing the composition of the total tax take across each G7 country, according to which tier of government collects it. So purple is in central government and the capital, and the greens are various tiers of subnational government. You can see also Canada's number 1 with the devolution. About half of all taxes are collected nationally, half subnationally. Japan is about 3/4 are collected by central government and 1/4 is collected at the local level. And the UK is right at the bottom. So 95% of our tax base is collected by central government and only 5% are collected by local authorities. That's capital tax. Even that is kind of subject to a lot of central controls, as we'll see. So changed. Push it around again. Let's see if we can get it to work. Yes. So not only is our tax base for local government very small, it's also very narrow. It's exclusively reliant on property taxes. Again, this is our G7 countries. You can see Japan is there in the middle. This is a chart showing the amount of local taxation that is collected as property taxes. Again, Japan is in the middle. About 1/4 of the local taxation is property taxes, whereas the UK is again all the way at the extreme end. Almost 100% of our taxes at the local level are collected as property taxes. When people propose here, we should introduce a local income tax. It sounds very scary. That sounds very exciting. It's actually pretty normal in the rest of the world. The weird thing is kind of fund local government solely through property taxes. Let's play happy quickly again. Right. So, and the property tax we do have, council tax, is very bad. It is unfair and it is regressive, and it doesn't raise that much money for places that need it. So going outside the West Midlands, this is a comparison we've used before, looking at 2 houses very close to each other in the East Riding and Hull in East Yorkshire. And you can see on the left, we've got a very nice house that's worth £1.5 million. Expensive garden, large gardens, very high price tag. And the council tax bill it faces is about £4,700. So about 0.3% of the value of the house is its council tax rate, its percentage bill. On the other hand, we have a 1-bed flat closer to central Hull. Price of that is about £27,000. but the tax bill for council tax is about £400, or about almost 5% of the value of that property. So even though the East Riding house is paying slightly more, the actual percentage tax rate for that property is much lower, which means that the person who's living, unfortunately, in the house on the right is facing a much higher bill proportionally than the one on the left. And crucially, these houses are very close to each other. We often talk about differences in this country in council tax between Westminster and Blackpool, these kind of opposite ends of the country, have very different performing local economies. Crucially, these two properties are part of the same local economy. They're all part of the whole East Riding graduate travel to work area, such that both of these local authorities sink or swim together. However, they are fragmented into two different councils. You have Hull on the right, which is relatively poor and has high need for services, whereas East Riding on the outskirts of Hull is relatively more affluent than Hull and has low social need. But currently, the way local finance works is these two financial systems are cut off from each other, even though they're joined together economically. Yes. And so how does our system currently get around this? Well, it absolutely prioritizes over all else equalization. So making sure that councils have roughly the same amount of resource, or the level of resource that central government deems necessary for them to fill what central government defines as local need. This chart is showing both the tax base per head in green and the grant per head in purple of each of those two authorities. And you can see that while East Riding can raise more in tax base per head than Hull, roughly the amount of kind of spending power is roughly equalized between East Riding and Hull because Hull gets more grant. Now, while there is an argument, obviously, that Hull should have more funding to close that particular gap, the net effect of this is that if Hull does become richer, if it becomes more affluent, if it grows its tax base, it is effectively punished with less grant. So there is no incentive for Hull, or indeed even kind of the East Riding or many local authorities, to fundamentally try and grow their tax base to fund local services and address regional inequality. This is what we mean when we say our system cares about equalization so much, it actually makes the country unequal. It prevents poorer places in the country, particularly large urban areas that underperform, from performing better and using that to fund their own local services. So, final bit from me. So we've set up some proposals for you. Happy to discuss this in the Q&A afterwards. I'm not going to go into too much detail. We think it's therefore crucial that to advance devolution, that there's a match between political geography and economic geography. We think the most promising geography for this is the graduate travel to work area. I'm kicking myself because I didn't include a map of this in this presentation to try and keep it short. But we've produced a version of this in our briefing called Economy First. I'd encourage people who are interested to go and check that out afterwards. We also think you can reform council tax and introduce a local income tax to address some of these issues. And broadly, the system should care much less about equalisation, and that we should shift from a system of national redistribution in terms of a local financial settlement to ones where you have a mix of poorer and richer neighbourhoods within each authority, so that we can have more local redistribution that can fund services and protect services by powering local government. That's all for me. Thank you very much. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Anthony. It is very interesting because when we went to Japan, there's just fundamental characteristics in the Japanese economy around turnover of housing stock, for example, that then by definition updates things like taxes on that property. If there's, the Japanese tend to just rebuild houses a lot more quickly. A lot of our housing stock here in the UK is like 100 years old. It's not uncommon for people to live in a house that was built 100 years ago. That is very uncommon in Japan. The difference being when you then apply tax rates on top of property values that aren't updated quickly enough, you get a lot more pronounced inequalities as time progresses. So thank you for that. Our fourth speaker will be Yoshihisa Inada, who is a director at the Asia Pacific Institute of Research, and he will be reflecting on monitoring and evaluation frameworks in Japan. His background is around econometrics and economic analysis. And so it's right up my street. So I'll be quite keen to see what he says. But Professor Inada, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So I'm also last speaker. So as well known, so international conference. So every participant speaks too much, and last speaker may be skewed. That's so chairman. Thank you very much for giving me a small time. Anyway, okay. Next slide, please. Okay, these 4 questions, I was asked 4 questions. They are as follows listed, 1 through to the 4. Okay, I will answer these questions in my speech. Okay, next please. Okay, today's outline of my speech is as follows. First, I have to talk about short story why we choose the expo again in Osaka, and the second is who bears the burden of the expo, and the third one is analysis of economic ripple effect of expo 2025, and finally I touch on briefly the legacy of Expo 2025. Sorry. Okay, next, please. Okay. This chart shows that Osaka Prefecture's GDP shares since 1955. So we, as well known, also, we studied history of Osaka in a textbook. Osaka was once called Manchester of the East before this World War II. But if you look at the data or share of the GDP, Osaka's GDP after the war, Osaka's GDP share climbed up to nearly 10% of the total GDP. But after that, in 1970s, we hosted the World Expo in Osaka. And then experienced first oil crisis and the second oil crisis, oil embargo, so on. So our Osaka economy's share is fell sharply, and now share hover around 7% or something like that. Okay, next please. And next slide, please. Okay, so this is a brief history related to the World Expo. Okay, so now Osaka Kansai Expo is held Umeshima Island, located not center Osaka, so located island. So Expo was hosted. Umeshima. So Umeshima, at the site of 2025 Osaka Kansai Expo, is an artificial island in Osaka city that was once filled with construction waste and other debris. With no clear plan for its use, it came to be known as a negative legacy. However, redevelopment is now underway in anticipation of the World Expo in the year 2025, and planned integrated resort on the in the same site. Okay. I have to tell about a brief story and concerning on this Expo. April 2010, regional political party, we say Osaka Restoration Association, so-called Osaka Ishin. That was so changed into the national political party, Japan Innovation Party, in the year 2020 September. And in their manifest, we can find that word explicitly stating bid for the expo. So, Ishin is thinking, so aiming for the turnaround in the Osaka economy. As I said that previous chart, so Osaka's share is declining. Okay, and basic plan for this expo was emerged in the year 2017 March. At that time, venue construction cost nearly 125 billion yen, and next year, 2018 November, BIE, Bureau of International Exposition General Assembly, permitted Osaka to host Expo 2025. Okay, next please. Okay, and in the year 2020 December, grand roof ring concept was set up, and according to that, so venue construction cost increased from 125 billion to 185 billion yen. So fast increase. Okay. As well known, this in the year 2022, so Russian invasion of Ukraine, this caused the acceleration of inflation. So costs skyrocketed. Okay. For example, next year, so in the year 2023, venue construction costs skyrocketed to the 235 yen. So this time, so there are negative campaigns increased, saying that we don't need expo or such as expensive expo. So anyway, for the expo, there are wind against the expo. And so we have to say, we have to show the economic impact and detail about cost and the performance. The end of year 2023 December, latest overview of public expenditure was conducted, and the next year. Early 2024, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI, and central government, Osaka Prefecture and the city, and our institution released the estimated economic impact of the World Expo. This is short history of this related to the World Expo. Anyway, Osaka government, prefectural government has been aiming for a turnaround in its economy. Okay, next please. Okay, this is you can easily understand. So maybe first video will show that location of Osaka Kansai, and right hand side is this is the Expo official character. We say myak, a mysterious creature born from the fusion of cells and waters. Anyway, its true identity remains unknown. Okay, next please. Second point is, next slide please, okay. Okay, who bears burdens? Okay, this table illustrates the cost sharing structure of the Expo, including Osaka Prefecture and Osaka City, and central government, and the business community and the expo associations. Okay, the venue construction cost borne by the organizer is estimated at 235 billion yen. This total sum, with three entities, each bearing 1/3 of the total. Furthermore, Osaka Prefecture and Osaka City each contributed 5 billion yen for the Osaka Healthcare Pavilion, and central government will bear 36 billion for the Japanese pavilion. Anyway, from the organizers side, operating expense are to be paid by the Expo Association, which will bear 116 billion yen, and this expense are to be covered by ticket buying, ticket revenues, and other revenues. And Osaka Prefecture and Osaka City will be responsible for bearing the cost of infrastructure development related to Expo. So Osaka Prefecture, providing 7.2 billion yen, and city government 23.3 billion yen. Furthermore, the same entity will be responsible for bearing the cost of hosting Expo. Anyway, so next, please. Okay, next, please. Next chart, please. Okay, this is it. Okay. API is a think tank specializing in the analysis of Kansai economy. So we monitor a major construction project in Kansai and Osaka, as well as a hotel construction project. Monitoring hotel construction is useful for analyzing the supply side when considering the potential of inbound industry in Kansai. The Osaka Kansai Expo, approved by the BIE November 2018. This is a project worth over 700 billion yen, so it is naturally being monitored, should be monitored. Since the Expo is a national project, the Expo Association has been formed by the national and the local government, and the METI, Ministry of Economy and Trade and Industry, is responsible for its implementations. METI explained the outline of a project and its performance. METI is well known for its impact analysis using input-output table techniques to assess the economic effect of the Expo. And local government of Osaka Prefecture and Osaka City also conduct a similar analysis. The former analyzed the effect of entire countries, while latter mainly analyzed the effect of Osaka Prefecture and Osaka City. We API also analyze the economic effect using our own Kansai inter-regional input-output table. Okay, next, please. This is the framework. Next chart.
Professor Inada, could we perhaps pause there? I'm just mindful of time, and whilst inverse matrices and input-output tables fill me with excitement, I think we might be, yeah.
Okay,
but so we'll pause here. Is it okay if we pause here and then maybe pick up some of the final points during the Q&A? Would that be okay?
Okay.
Yes? Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, we're just very tight on time now, and I just want to make sure that we have sufficient time to pull the four themes together. So we will come back to the final points in your slide, if that's okay.
Okay, sure, I know that.
Thank you very much, Professor Yanato. So clearly from that presentation, there is a lot of monitoring and evaluation that's done through data. I think one key difference that we've noticed through our research is that frameworks looking at value in its different forms, whether that's economic value, social value to local communities, and how that's interpreted and constructed through conversations with local partners is very, very different to how it's done here in the UK, where we have things like Green Book and value for money frameworks that are really advocated by places like the National Audit Office. So that was one key point of difference, I would say, and maybe an area where Japan could learn from what's happening in the UK. So I'm going to turn it over now to Abigail Taylor, who's a research fellow at the School of Business, the City Ready. She's going to thread together the four themes in a way that hopefully will summarize it in your minds. So over to you, Abby.
Thanks very much, Jeff. What I've done is I've chosen 4 photos from our trip to Japan last year when Jeff and I had the privilege to go and visit Professor Nobu Fujiwara, who is on the right of the photo. He's one of our co-authors of the report. And then also a photo from when Naoki came over to the West Midlands last year. We did a series of visits and interviews, as explained in the video. So this was the first time that I had visited Japan, and what I really want to do in the next few minutes is just draw out some of the things that struck me most and link them back to those 4 themes that we've been talking about over the last hour or so. So the first one of these was empowering and equitable funding. This is a photo from when we did a walking tour in Nishinari Ward, which is part of Osaka. It's a neighborhood that has a lot of guest workers there, and we really saw the regeneration and the new housing that is being constructed there. And for me, this symbolized how the officials who we spoke to in Japan were really quite positive about how empowering and equitable the funding system is there through the local allocation tax model, and the fact that funding formulas, for example, are updated annually. Though people didn't seem concerned particularly about having particularly rising population needs in terms of being able to respond to them. People said they could fairly easily have the resources to construct new schools or new housing, for example. Katie, I thought it was really interesting how you talked about the integrated settlement and all the progress that has been there, being made there. And I think that's really, really positive. But compared to Japan, I think the funding's still shorter term and there are still fewer levers, particularly in terms of fiscal devolution. So the next, this is one of my favourite photos from the trip. It's definitely one of Anne's highlights. We took a Shinkansen train, and I think we did the 56 kilometers, 35 miles between Kyoto and Osaka in just 15 minutes. It was so quick. But the reason
how long did it take to build?
The reason I chose this is because I think what we discovered through the interviews was the seamlessness of transport is important in multiple ways, but it's particularly important in terms of our theme around strong regional linkages and groupings, because the seamlessness transport contributes to the effective integration across different scales, local, regional and national. We felt that people in Osaka were able to have more identities, and that was facilitated through the transport that enabled them to work across a wider region more easily than we have in the UK. and work across administrative boundaries. So I think what we argue in the report is that administrative boundaries and enable shared. I'm getting all my words in the wrong way, so I shouldn't have written so many notes on one slide. We argue that the transport really was important to enabling integration across these tiers. Also, if we go to the next slide then, this is one of the photos from when Naoki came to us, and it was taken at the Black Country Museum. We visited the Black Country Museum to get a sense of the history of the West Midlands and the history of collaboration across local authorities. And one of the things that I remember most is that whilst we were there, we drew a timeline for Naoki of all of the different institutions, a bit like your timeline, Katie, but we went back to the 1970s. And one of the things that really struck us was the frequency of institutional change in the West Midlands compared to in Japan. And I think, as you pulled out in your slides, that one of the things that we really thought there is potential to learn from in the West Midlands is how in Japan places have been able to test, to propose and then pilot additional powers through the National Special Strategic Zones. And then this photo, I was struggling for a photo that really represented monitoring and evaluation and multi-layered systems, but this is frozen ice and or shaved ice, and it was something that we ate a lot when we were in Japan because it was 45 degrees when we were there. But what I hope this conveys is the concept of multiple layers of monitoring and evaluation. I think what we argue in the report is that in the West Midlands and the UK more broadly, monitoring and evaluation is not perfect, but there is learning, I think, that can be taken from the systems we have here in terms of the need to develop learning loops, which embed monitoring and evaluation throughout project design, throughout the project life cycles, and then back into policy development. I think when we spoke to people in Japan, there was more of a focus on sort of routine KPI monitoring, and perhaps that's because there's less competition for funding. I think that certainly something that could be researched further. Thanks, Alina. So these those are some of the key messages in our report, which link back to those photos that I've just shown you. I have one final slide because I think we've had a lot of slides today, but this is what we hope the report will support. I'll just pick out a couple of points there. In the panel today, we've heard about some of the challenges of the UK system in terms of short-term nature of funding, lack of fiscal devolution. I think there's learning that we go into a lot of detail in the report about from Japan there. And also, as Katie mentioned, I think we really do point to the potential of the English devolution white paper launched last year for the strategic authorities to recommend new devolved functions and test those locally, and that really could be beneficial. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abby. Okay, so now we are at the point of questions. We have a few minutes, so if anyone has questions on any of the points we discussed or any other observations, that would be very welcome. We do have a number of participants online from Japan as well, so for those who are on the webinar, please feel free to submit any questions via the chat. So does anyone have any questions or observations? Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Philip Davis. I was chair of the West Midlands Regional Assembly 20 years ago in the previous devolution process in this country. question is to the colleague from Centre for Cities. We clearly have a national problem, a cultural problem with centralisation, because we could have had this debate 40 years ago. I was involved in these debates, and nothing has really shifted. Worse place now than we were then. How do you see us shifting this, if that is at all possible? Clearly, it's a political process, but I'm very interested in your comments, because I think they were spot on in terms of the crisis in democracy that we have in this country and the over-centralisation.
Do you want to take one of the questions, or?
Sure, we can. I think you also, there was a question there. Yes.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was really interested about the point about in Japan that the frameworks are updated regularly. I was kind of interested, how do they do that in such a timely way? Do they have like a huge civil service who's in, like what mechanics are in place to allow them to do that?
This is the monitoring.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes,
yeah.
that's fine. Okay. Was there a third question? We'll kind of loop it together so that different. Oh.
I suppose just a bit more specific on general sort of centralisation versus devolution. I mean, the crux of this is finance and taxation. How do we get, or how did Japan get to a local income tax and a much more decentralised model? That's the key for me. Is how do we think we do that?
Okay.
Yeah, so okay. I'm building on that then. So you talked about devo by default, which is what but it strikes me that in Japan it feels like it's devo by design. And so interested in how we, because that's the way the structures were set up. We obviously have a highly centralised model, and how do we shift then to something? Because I don't think it can be by default. I think it has to be by design.
Good question. So we have 4 questions around finances, structures, monitoring, and evaluation frameworks. Maybe each person could touch on one of the topics because we're limited on time. So shall we start with you, Anthony?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think you're absolutely right. We were having these debates and discussions a long time ago. A lot of my work and thinking on this is influenced quite strongly by the Redcliffe Maud reports, which actually is, if you look at the geography for that, it's actually pretty similar to our graduate travel to work areas today. It's kind of spooky. And also the Layfield report in the 70s, which recommended local income tax solutions to these problems. I think kind of Toby makes exactly the point, which is I think the solution to this, which is it has to be about solving the local finance system becomes about how we improve economic growth in this country. Previous debates about local government and devolution in this country always get stuck when it's sort of enthusiasts almost for local government, people who have a stake in the system, sort of ask for more monies from central government, more powers, and also then to be sort of left alone and to do their own thing. I think the big challenge conceptually British politics has is convincing economic policymakers, not just in Treasury, primarily in Treasury, but not just in Treasury, but also wider debates that our extreme centralisation of finance is causing social problems that we're already seeing in local government, but also economic problems as well. If we can pitch fiscal devolution is how we not just put local authorities back on their feet, but it's also about how we improve the long-run economic performance of the country as a whole, and particularly places that are underperforming. I think that's a powerful message we can take to the national debate, but it isn't quite being made loudly and clearly enough as it should be.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that in such a centralized structure that we have here in the UK, central government, when it transfers sets of responsibilities to local authorities, needs to transfer associated funding. And when that doesn't happen, I think it's the responsibility of local and regional authorities to really push back and say, no, we don't want these responsibilities because you're not funding us for it. And there is a lot of tension that we notice. But you sort of do need to stand up and say, no, we can't take these responsibilities on because there isn't any funding, even for the things that you've already asked us to do. Next question would
Funding or tax rate?
Yes. Yes. But then that's another hurdle, the tax raising things, so like lower hanging fruit is just saying you need to give us funding.
Yeah, I would say the position we're getting to is that there probably shouldn't be much more devolution of powers until there is significant devolution of tax raising powers. I think we're now at a point where local authorities, combined authorities are now quite a growing set of responsibilities. The risk is we end up something like almost like the Northern Ireland situation, where you have loads of devolution of powers, but very few tax raising powers and quite poor economic performance as a result.
There was a question around how does Japan get to a more decentralized model? So maybe I'll bring in one of the co-authors on this report, Naoki Fujiwara. Naoki, would you like to maybe share some reflections around how Japan has gotten to where it is today, and maybe some of a key lesson that could be imparted to colleagues here in the audience today from the UK? Naoki?
I'm not sure if you can hear us. He's there.
We can see him.
Yeah.
Would you like to touch on that point whilst
Yeah.
you wait?
I think I can touch on that point and also link it to, I think it was with your question about how they manage to update it. Oh, okay, are you there? Maybe if you type in the chat, okay, you can hear it. I think when we were in Osaka, we were struck.
We can't quite hear you.
The sound's not coming through, Naoki. We can't hear you.
Okay. All right. Sorry, we're having audio difficulties, Naoki. So
in terms of the question about the resources, we were struck by how many people there were in each institution we work with. Generally, where in Birmingham or the West Midlands, the institutions might have one or two people in that role who we could speak to. Often when we were in Osaka, there were 5 or 6 people around a table who we spoke to, which made interviews last a long time, but we were very, very grateful for all the information. So I think there is greater resourcing, although of course the population size that the areas are responsible for is higher. But the point about I don't know if Naoki is coming in, it's been a long process in Japan. They introduced a decentralization law in 1999, and that was introduced to make decision making regarding local responsibilities clearer, and they built on that in the decades since.
Yes.
Just coming with a few other thoughts, I think, on the broader question as to how we move from a more centralised state to a decentralised one. I guess a couple of additional reflections to what you said, Anthony, because I agree with all of that. I think we really need champions within government to drive this forward. And I think we saw that actually with George Osborne when he was Chancellor. And they wanted to see it, and they genuinely believed that they would get better value for local regions and better impact, but importantly could see the benefit for UK PLC by doing it as well. And I think it was unique with George Osborne that he was actually in Treasury and trying to push it forward too. So I think making sure Treasury is on board is absolutely critical, as you mentioned. I also think it's very important to try and get political consensus across the parties as well, because this has to be a long-term piece. It can't, we've seen how many things chop and change, and different parties of different colours like a certain term, and then they come power, and then things move on. And actually, you can't operate in the way Japan's been doing by doing that. I also think we need to change the views of civil servants. there is too many of them who, I don't mean to say this disrespectfully, but might have come from Oxbridge and gone straight to work in Whitehall, completely hugely intelligent, but actually haven't lived in the regions, don't understand what the regions need and have a particular perspective. And, it's always challenging, isn't it? In many ways, it's turkeys voting for Christmas, but you've got to be able to change that civil service viewpoint. I also think that I suppose a few other reflections. I'd be very interested to see where government is post the current elections that we've just had as well, given some of the, advent of reform mayors, and, will they still want to do much greater devolution on the back of that? Question, we need to see it. And I think my final reflection is, whilst it's easy for me and others to say we need fiscal devolution, local areas have got to want to use those tools. My view is you really need a menu of tools, and for then combined authorities, mayors decide how to use them. But actually, it's also incredibly difficult for politicians when we know there is hugely challenged public for individual people, residents, to say we're going to put another tax on you. So, I think we found it in the West Midlands, even there are some tools, we haven't actually used them all yet. So whilst we still need to push for further fiscal devo, we've also got to show Treasury, and I recognise this is difficult, that we're willing to use what we've got, and we therefore need to go further and faster.
Isn't the problem that local government is on its knees anyway financially? We've lost 50% of our budget since 2010. So things just don't work. The council is broken, as is the national financial system in terms of local government. So, I mean, the conclusion I draw from all this, having grappled with these issues for 50 years, is that we need constitutional change. The reason the Japanese system has developed as it has is because, presumably, I'm not an expert on Japanese constitutional politics, presumably because the nature of local government was defined separately in the constitution, and it cannot just be changed at the fiat of a particular minister, which is the situation in the UK, and that's the core of the problem.
One point I would raise to the question that you asked around the monitoring frameworks. This is a good question because Japan and the UK do it, as I've mentioned in my opening remarks, quite differently. In Japan, the structures are quite defined. One could almost say rigid. The formulas are there, the process is there, and they literally run it like a sausage machine and then update those formulas and structures at an annual or whatever periodic frequency. And it's just taken as is. So these formulas just get updated and there's no really questions around it. The UK, on the other hand, we have a much more dynamic process, which I think is good because, as I said previously, it allows us to think through different concepts of value when we do cost effectiveness analysis of our public interventions. It allows a richness in understanding where value is being generated. And also it allows us to focus on outcomes and not just outputs, which is a very different culture from what's happening in Japan. That has its downsides because of that dynamism. It slows the process down to the point where we lose track that we haven't done an update to the fair funding. We haven't done the fair funding review, and it just, we keep kicking the can down the road, down the road, and that process accumulates in a very negative way. So one of the learnings around monitoring and evaluation from the report is that there needs to be a middle ground where you have some certainty in frameworks that do the monitoring, evaluation, and connecting that to the pre-stage assessment, but also making sure that you don't get stuck in sort of a tick box exercise, that you take into consideration ideas of values from different perspectives and then map that to outcomes that matter to local communities. So it's finding that balance. And I think across all four pieces, themes, and this is sort of the wrap up of the session, is that there needs to be balance. There isn't one silver bullet that addresses all four of these things. Different places will have different strategies of defining regional groupings because, well, it's not a cookie cutting exercise. So you need to take local factors, cultural factors into account as well. The finance and funding mechanisms, as we've heard from our guests in Japan, Professor Ishihara and Professor Inada, they've touched on the richness of funding mechanisms that exist at a local and regional level that today do not exist in the UK. These shouldn't be taken for granted, but these aren't special to Japan. And that seems obvious, but I mean, like, the UK is very much more an outlier than Japan is. And so that's a lesson that we need to learn, that if we can't extend the tax base through different revenue raising mechanisms, the least we should do is make sure that of the revenue raising mechanisms that we have in place, we update those formula and mechanisms much more timely. So that's up my book for that. And the last and final point I would say is partnership working and collaboration is key. And hopefully that's what we've been able to convey through this piece of work that we've done, not just through SIPFA and the University of Birmingham, and with colleagues in Japan that have supported this piece of work extensively, but also to all of the people we've engaged with, practitioners, academics, policymakers, because we have spoken with a number of policymakers in Japan at the different spatial tiers. It's a process of learning. And what I've learned personally is that the Japanese are just as good as the UK, despite the cultural differences, in doing that type of engagement and collaboration amongst themselves. And so on that note, I thank you all for joining us, and for the people online. I know it's the evening in Japan, but thank you very much for joining us.